you're pointing at the fact there that we live in entirely separate realities. So you and I could be having a conversation, or we could have had a meeting yesterday, and I go off with a bunch of thoughts about the situation or you or me in that meeting, and I create a story in my head unknowingly. Before I know it, I'm living in a story that says, you didn't like what I said. And so you're immersed in this story. And if we just live in the story of our head, if we're not checking in and getting curious about how other people saw it, then we could be living in cuckoo land.
Absolutely. And I replay a story when I talk to people, especially at work, about this experience that I've gone through and the learnings that I continue to take from all this work. I tell stories around that point quite frequently, about not assuming that you know what somebody else's reality is and how that can impact their outcome. And it always seems to resonate. So I think it's something that shows up for a lot of people, that we just go on this our day to day and we don't check in as much as we need to.
Yeah. So have you got any examples you can think of where you do this, or you've done it, or could you give anything that comes to mind?
I've got the story that I share.
Great.
That I tell to kind of demonstrate the point. It normally comes, it could be when I'm working with someone in the business, when they're pitching or presenting, or they're worried about how they're perceived and judgment of others. And there's a story I tell about, I'm in a pitch room with a colleague that I'm working with who's worked really, really hard on a pitch, and they're presenting to the client. And the client isn't particularly responsive. So the person next to me is pitching, and they're going through all of their hard work, and they're hitting every point. But they're not getting much back, even though they're trying. So they're speeding up, and they're getting faster and faster and faster. And they're making the assumption, because they're not getting anything back, and I know this from after the fact, we had a conversation about it, but they made the assumption that because they're not getting any response, they're probably not interested, and they just want to get through the meeting as fast as possible. So they continue to speed up. And then the client glances at their watch, and it just makes everything so much worse. And it kind of, I can see this person next to me almost slightly falling apart now, because he's been shaken by the fact that he thinks they don't want to be in the room. He hasn't got time. He's glanced at his watch. What's the next meeting, etc. So I saw what was going on, and I took a moment and I paused the meeting, and I said to the client, I said, I'm so sorry to interrupt. Can I just take a moment to check in? I can see you've glanced at your watch. Have you got somewhere else to be? Do we need to reschedule? Do we need to wrap up? Let me know what's going on. And the client turned around and said, well, no, you said you needed sign off by the 10th. So I was just checking the date to make sure I've got enough time to let you know that we can give you the work and you can go and do what you need to do. And then that changed the whole course of the meeting. And I think there was a risk there, if we hadn't have checked in, that we could have thrown the pitch, because we'd have skipped over details perhaps and not said the important things, got out the room as fast as possible. So yeah, that's the story I tell that seems
amazing example. Wonderful, right? Well, I so love it. So there we are with somebody else, and they've got certain things going on, behaviors, mannerisms, whatever they're doing, and of course our mind is making that mean something. It's making it mean something all the time, and so we see those signs, and then we just live in the story in our head about what those signs mean. And so I love this, because all the time there's indicators going on in the outside world that we can pick up on, or we can just ignore them. We can ignore them, or we can ignore them and make a story about them.